from what I understand, the book and the movie, there were certain things that you couldn't say due to legal reasons, and now this is your chance to tell what really happened, correct?
Right.
So what changed? What happened that made you allowed to be able to tell your story?
Well, all of the legal stuff has passed, and actually, when I first got back, it was 1975. It was a little difficult then to talk about the fact that I had several times been to Istanbul prior to this and taken hash and brought it back to the United States.
Right.
Again, I spoke to my lawyer back then, and he said, let me get this straight. You, the escaped convict drug smuggler with Interpol warrant for your arrest, you want to admit to the United States government that you'd been to Turkey 3 times, brought the hash back, and sold it here. Is that correct? I said, I think so. He said, one more question. Are you out of your fucking mind? You can't say that. So, in the book, I had to say this is the first time.
Got it.
Turkish court from the beginning had assumed, and I did not dissuade them from the assumption, that this was the first time I'd smuggled hash. And so it stood, and it stood for many years. But I'm not worried now because statute of limitation is gone.
Yep.
The Turkish government does not care anymore. I don't have an Interpol warrant. In fact, I was back there 2 years ago.
I was going to ask you that. I read that online.
It was great. I got to go back and talk about all of the stuff that I've been wanting to say out publicly for quite a while and sort of heal the breach between us. Because again, my problem with the book is my book. Other than the fact that I couldn't say that I'd done this before, everything in the book is true. If you like it or don't like it, it doesn't matter, but it's relatively true. The film made some major changes. Among them is the total attitude. There are no good Turks in the movie Midnight Express.
Right.
It's incredibly well made and powerful. Alan Parker and Brad and God love him. I mean, but it created an overall impression that all Turks are like this, and Turkey's a terrible place. It's not. I've said that from day one. I got along great with the Turks. I love Istanbul.
Right.
I didn't like Turkish prison, and I don't like their legal system, but that's kind of a given anywhere you get busted. So I was able to go back and sort of balance that out a few years back.
And what was that experience like? Were they receptive?
They were so receptive. They wanted me to come back because they'd seen a YouTube 10, 12 years, somewhere I did a thing, and it's on YouTube. A Turkish guy had asked me this. He said, I'd heard that you liked Turkey. I said, yeah. So we talked about it.
Yeah.
He put it up, and the next day it was out on YouTube, which is amazing to me how that can happen. And these Turkish police saw this a few years back. They were having a big international conference in Istanbul about peace and global security. They had 1,000 police representatives from 85 countries in Istanbul. And these cops contacted me and said, we saw your YouTube, and they wanted me to come back, and they had a press conference because they had international press there, and they wanted me to say what I've been saying, but have a bigger audience to hear it about Turkey and the Turks, because the film, it really hurt them. It created an overall impression that to this day they're still having to deal with. It really hurt their the tourist industry. It dropped off like 90% when Midnight Express came out, which isn't valid. I mean, it's an amazing place. The history of Istanbul alone, you should go back and see it. So I got to go back and tell my tale, and I spent 4 days in Istanbul, which was an amazing thing for me to go back. I'd always wanted to go back, and I used to be the most hated man in Turkey, which is, I'm not saying that, they told me that, and now it's changed because I was in all of their newspapers and in a lot of their TV shows. They saw the press conference that we had, and I've had people go back to Istanbul and talk since then, talk to Turks, and they say, oh yeah, Billy Hayes came back, and he said that, you know, all the Turks aren't bad, like you know, the prison's bad, but he likes us, and I'm glad that that impression is disseminated out there a bit.
Yep, and that's great that you got the opportunity to go over and
It's
tell the
good,
story.
psychically it was good for me, just to have that balance come around, and I love seeing Istanbul again. What an amazing place it is.
And you speak Turkish, correct?
Turkçe konuşuyorum.
And how long were you in prison before you were able to pick that up?
I refused to learn Turkish the first year, just other than numbers, because you have to, you know, do exchanges and buy and sell stuff. Because I knew that I wouldn't need it because I'm not going to stay here. You know, other people get prison sentences in time jail, but not me. Once again, I'll never get sentenced. No, not me. And after a year or so, I said, you know, maybe I better learn the language. So I took a book and I learned it, and it's the best way to learn it is be in the country.
And that was one of my other questions. I mean, there had to be a moment either when you were first arrested or when, you know, you had 54 days left and then they gave you life, where you just go into denial and you believe this isn't happening.
I went into denial when I looked out the window of the bus, when I had all this hash taped there, and I looked out the window and there were Turkish soldiers in a cordon around the airplane, and they had a table set up where they were searching people, and my first reaction was, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. Not to me. I'm looking at it and I'm denying the reality in front of me. Well, that didn't work. But from that point on, I kept denying that I'm going to spend time here. Not me, not me, not me. I'm way too smart and good looking to get arrested. I really believed that. That's how stupid I was. After a while, it seeped in that, yeah, you know, I may be spending some time here.
Did you ever believe that you might spend the full 30 years there?
That was hard because, you know, I originally had the 4-year and 2-month sentence, and then I was counting out the days, and then they changed it to life, which they reduced to 30 years. Thanks, I guess. 30 years, life's all the same. But at that point, the reality of maybe spending the rest of my life in jail was certainly out there. I couldn't really accept it, but it was certainly there. I think the biggest change for me came in my dreams, because when I first got in, I would dream about being free and wake up and, oh my God, I'm still in jail, and have this terrible jarring from my dreams to life. But once that changed, after a little while, I would wake up, and even if I was dreaming about being free, I knew I was in jail. And that told me that something that psychologically had happened to me.
Right. Looking back on it now, I mean, obviously a 30-year sentence is extreme for the crime. What type of punishment do you think your crime deserved?
What type of punishment my crime deserved is whatever the law was in the country at the time, because that's the law. Well, you can like it or not like it, or you can be ignorant of it, but that's the law. So my advice is always do what you like and know what you're doing. Knowing what you're doing means take responsibility for your own actions. And that still exists today. A whole different subject is legalizing drugs and putting people in jail for drugs. We don't have the time or the place to talk about that, but all drugs should be legalized. It stops the middlemen, it stops the crime, it takes half the prison population out of the United States, it stops the corrupt legal system that we have because of drugs, and the police system we have because of drugs. You have 18-year-old kids being sent in prison for pot? Are you kidding me? You think that's going to help them, to put them in jail? No, it doesn't. We should legalize all drugs. Drugs, prostitution, all crimes that don't have any victims should be legalized. Of course. Tax it, educate people to what it is, because you're going to make your own decisions anyway. But the insanity of the war on drugs, Richard Nixon. I hate Richard Nixon. And he essentially started the war on drugs that has created this climate that we have all over the world now. A lot of foreign countries didn't do this. Nixon forced them, by United States aid, to increase their penalties in drugs. And look where we are.
Can we talk a little bit about the night that you escaped?
Sure.
Was there a moment where you thought, shit, there's no turning back now? I'm in this.
Yeah. When I came out of, I was in this tomato bin, and I crawled over the top and started crawling across the beach. And at that point, I was committed. Prior to that, you talk about escape. Everybody talks about it. There's a huge abyss of pain and fear between talking about escaping and actually trying it. And once I started crawling on the beach and went into the water, I was committed. At that point, it was escape or get killed. I wouldn't accept anything in between, because getting arrested again and beaten and stuff, it was either escaping or dying. One way or the other, I'm out of prison.
You were done with it, one way or the other. Do you ever get letters from inmates asking you advice?
All the time. I just had somebody in Costa Rica, a 53-year-old man. The Costa Rican council called me on the phone. In fact, Dick Atkins arranged it, because he does this work. He's the real deal for Americans in foreign jails. This guy walks the walk and does the talk. If you're in trouble, this is the guy you need. Dick Atkins takes care of people. He called me. I talked to the Costa Rican ambassador, 53-year-old American man. He'd been in jail for a year for drugs, and he was psychologically breaking down, and they were putting him in a hospital, and they wanted to know what I could say to him, which very little. I mean, I offered he should learn yoga, which saved my life in jail, but I was 23 when I went in. You're at the height of your physical power. At 53, I mean, I'm 63 now. It's tough enough getting up in the morning, much less getting up being in jail and having to deal with that. So that's just brutally difficult.
Right.
So the only advice is don't get arrested.
So I know that you're an actor, a writer, a director. What other projects do you have on the horizon?
I have a book, Letters from a Turkish Prison. The letters I wrote during the time I was in jail. This is all sort of coming around again, and I have a one-man show called Riding the Midnight Express that's going to open here in Los Angeles, which is essentially this kind of stuff. About every 30 years I make a big splash. 30 years ago I made a splash, and now I make it when I'm 90. When you see what I do when I'm 90. So I'm doing things in and around that at the moment.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. All right, well, thank you so much for talking with us.